I'm making sausage rolls, and this is something that my mom always made for us when we were kids, and so I really like it. So I'm using 2 kinds of sausages. This is just regular Italian sausage, and this sausage is uncooked. So I'm taking it out of its casing, and it'll be much easier to work with that way. And then this is buffalo sausage, which is already pre-cooked, but I'm going to mince it up because it'll make it easier to work with. So, and also because it's pre-cooked, it's kind of like really stiff. Like if you look at this, it's like really squishy. But then if you look at this, like you can't do the same thing with that. You can't squish it the same. So I'm just going to put these in the food processor. And I've got some onions here and garlic that are already chopped up. Normally, if I was just using one kind of sausage, then I wouldn't do this. I would just chop it up really fine. But since I'm using this buffalo sausage, I'm just going to mix it in here. And I'm going to just kind of mince all of it together into chunks, I guess, so that'll mix easier with the other sausage. Some of these larger pieces down. Of course, when you're working with a food processor, you always gotta be conscious of where the blade is, because they're super sharp, and I've cut myself on it more than once from being stupid. So, just doing stupid things like not watching where the blade was at. Okay, I'd say that's good enough. And so I'm going to mix this into the sausage that we already have. And really, like, when you make sausage rolls, you can really think of them as like a blank slate, and just kind of like mix in any kind of flavors that you want with it. I've used curry, I've used all kinds of spices, and just all kinds of different things, and it always comes out just a little bit differently. But you know, if you think it'll taste good, it probably will when it comes to sausage rolls. And so just kind of get as much of that as we can out. Okay, so now I'm going to use my hands, just because it'll be easier that way. And you just want to mix all your sausage together. You want to make a good mix of it. I don't want to put it back into the food processor, because then it just kind of turns it into like a slurry, which is fine. That's not too bad, but sometimes I like my meat to be a little bit more chunky when I'm making this. So I'm just mixing this up as best I can, mix everything together. And then I usually like to add in things like parsley or chives or basil, whatever. It's like I said, it really is kind of like a bit blank slate dish. So you can add almost anything into sausage, and it's into the sausage rolls, and it's going to taste good. For the dough that I have over there, it's just the basic pie dough, so that's why I didn't show how to make it. And that's what I'm going to wrap the sausages in.
This is the dough. Could you give a quick rundown on how someone would make dough?
For this particular one, I used 3 cups of flour and 2 2 sticks of unsalted butter. Let's see, a tablespoon of sugar, and like a half a teaspoon of salt, and water. And what I did was I just put the flour, the sugar, and the salt into the food processor. I pulsed it a few times to mix it, and then I put in the butter, but in small chunks, like maybe an inch or smaller of chunks, because otherwise you'll just bend your blade. And then just pulsed it until and slowly added in the butter until it looked like cornmeal, and then slowly added in ice cold water until it started to come together. And because we're at a high altitude, you probably would have to add in a little more water than normal just because of the altitude that we're at. So I added in probably about a half a cup of water in all, even though the recipe only called for like 3/4 or a third of a cup. I added in about a half because it's just because of our altitude. Otherwise, it won't come together properly, and it's just harder to make it come together when you live at such a high altitude.
Okay, but anybody can look up another pie dough tutorial and
Yeah, it's very easy.
make pie dough.
Yeah, very easy.
And it's a little bit, it's not a runny dough, it's a little stiff.
Yeah, I put it in the fridge for a couple hours, just so that the butter could kind of re-solidify in there, which they always tell you to do when you make pie dough. It's a good idea to follow. So this is my dough for my sausage rolls, and I'm just rolling it out right now. It's still kind of hard because it was in the fridge. But that's okay. It'll take a while to roll it all out. So I've got my dough all laid out really thin. And I've got a mixture of milk and egg. That's about maybe a 1/8 of a cup of milk or a 1/4 cup of milk, and 1 large egg. And I'm gonna put it all over the dough. And this just gives it like an extra richness and helps the dough come out a little bit better. Once I roll up the meat in here, I'm also gonna put this on top of the meat. Okay, so I'm gonna put in the meat now. And I'm gonna put it close to this edge because that's the edge I'm gonna start rolling at. And kind of like a meatloaf, I'm just making a log of the meat. And this is just the really basic meat mixture that I already made, with just the onions and garlic. I haven't added anything else to it. I like it like it's good, nice and plain like this. If you're not too keen on having a lot of different spices, it is pretty good this way. Okay, so now that's like that. So I'm going to take the dough and just carefully roll it into a log. And because you put the egg everywhere, it's going to kind of help it stick to itself as well. Okay, so, and it doesn't need to look perfect. This is, you know, I guess what you would call rustic kind of cooking. So now we have one roll. So I'm just gonna cut this here. And I have a pan here that is lightly oiled, and that'll just help it to not stick too much, because it will kind of stick if you don't. So I'm going to put it on here. And before I put it in here, you could cut it into smaller pieces if you want. But I'm going to put the egg mixture over top. I used whole wheat flour for this, so that's why it's kind of brown already, but you can use regular flour, it doesn't matter. Just happened that I had whole wheat flour on hand. And so you want to make sure that the top of the dough is like fully covered, because this will help it brown up nicely, and like I said, it just adds an extra richness to your sausage rolls, and it just makes it look really pretty and taste really good. Gives it a really nice crispiness. Okay, so now it's ready to bake, and I'm preheating my oven to 375, and once I put this in, I'm gonna bake it for about 45 minutes to an hour. Okay, now I'm gonna put this in the oven for about an hour. Alright, these are the finished sausage rolls, and as you can see, the meat is fully cooked after cooking for about an hour, and the crust is flaky and it's good.
Yeah, we're already eating it with some mashed potatoes.